You smell that?
Nature's most powerful aphrodisiac.
Leaving right after this drink. Rock and roll, whiskey, and other stories. With your host, Brian Shaw.
Cheers. Oh, man. There is nothing that hits the spot better than a Jack Daniels on the fucking rocks. Welcome to episode 20 of I'm Leaving Right After This Drink. Rock and roll, whiskey, and other stories. So before we get into tonight's show, we're going to talk a little bit about how you should like and subscribe and share and all that bullshit that comes along with, you know, doing a podcast and having this YouTube channel and all that stuff. And so we got that out of the way. That was quick. That was easy. Kind of like I like my women. Just kidding. Listen, this is what happens when you drink and you turn your camera on and you do a podcast that's not very serious. So tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about like alternative music, I guess, because this is kind of where I would categorize this stuff. And it will lead into one story of an artist that I never really cared for. And then when I met him, I was like, wow, you're kind of a dick. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to try and keep track of the number of F words that are dropped in this episode, because it seems to have been pointed out numerous times over the first 19 episodes of how many times I managed to use the F word in the podcast. Still don't know why you fucking care. You guys know how I talk. So here's where we're going to go with tonight's episode. We're going to start it off, like I said, alternative music. And I've been watching Billy Corgan's new podcast. I think it's called The Magnificent Others. And I have to tell you, man, I fucking think this is a phenomenal fucking podcast. And the reason why is because the way he goes about doing his interviews is pretty damn cool. He has a unique style. He does the research. He's doing different things, even though he's interviewing the same people that you've watched be interviewed time and time and time again. But yet he's pulling out some different information. He's coming at it a little bit different. And so I happen to really, really dig this podcast, and especially coming from a guy who doesn't really even like the Smashing Pumpkins, never really got into Billy Corgan at all. And I had a friend of mine today tell me what an amazing guitar player he was, and I'm like, what? Billy Corgan? Like I had no clue, and really kind of know absolutely nothing about the Smashing Pumpkins or Billy Corgan other than I really never liked their music. So obviously, look at me. Like, do you think I liked some of the alternative stuff? No, not at all. But Alice in Chains? Fuck yeah. I guess that was more grunge, alternative, whatever. Who gives a fuck? So what I'm getting at is if you haven't watched Billy Corgan's podcast, you should definitely do so, man. He's had some cool interviews. He's interviewed Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. Sharon Osbourne was a fucking great interview. And I really learned a lot, actually, about Sharon and her background. And, you know, I had always heard the story about, like, her dad was going to be Ozzy's manager, and then she stole him. But I never realized how many amazing artists that her dad actually had managed. Like, that fucking list is crazy with the amount of, like, huge artists that her dad was managing at the time. You know, I think the interview with Gene Simmons was pretty cool. The interview with Wolfgang Van Halen, like, I don't understand the whole Wolfgang Van Halen thing. Like, don't get me wrong. Kid's an unbelievable guitarist, unbelievable musician. How can he not be? His dad was fucking Eddie Van Halen, right? His uncle is Alex Van Halen. Like, dude, it's unfucking believable. And I am certainly not taking anything away from this kid's musical talent because he's amazing. But the interview itself is rather boring. Wolfie is very, like, soft-spoken, which he normally is in his interviews and stuff, but he just, to me, doesn't really have that, like, outgoing personality that makes an interview, like, really fun. And coming from a guy who interviewed a lot of people who were not very good interviews, it's hard to get people to kind of come out of their shell a little bit. And it seems like he either doesn't really like doing them, but kind of knows he has to, which could very well be the case. Maybe he does enjoy them. I'm not really sure. But that interview to me was, it was okay. It wasn't really one of the longer ones either. And so I've definitely enjoyed listening, you know, to his podcast. And as we're kind of here on the topic of the alternative side. Today, I see that Everclear, Sponge, and Local H have announced a tour. What the fuck year is it? And I know we say that all the time, even including the 80s hair bands and shit. We're like, dude, what? It's Poison, Def Leppard, Motley Crue. Like, what fucking year is it? Yeah, I get it. Same thing here. And I guess Everclear is going out like on a 40th anniversary tour or whatever, which is absolutely insane. And when I think about these, these artists, and I go, man, it's been 25 years ago since I was playing those fucking songs on the radio. Holy shit, that's insane. Local H, same thing. I remember playing those guys on the radio and kind of going, I don't get it. And which is really what it comes down to, right? Like there's just something about that music that just didn't, strike a chord with me. And so I just never really got into it all that much. Even though like, if I'm going to listen to like Smashing Pumpkins, of course, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, like that's just a badass fucking jam. And even I could admit that, even though, like I said, not a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan. And I know everybody's going to go, well, that's their fucking hit. Well, you should, I get it. But you're not going to convince me to really kind of get into the Smashing Pumpkins at this point in time in my life. But Everclear, Local H, and Sponge. All three good bands, in my opinion. Great bands, you could even say. Just not my thing. Sponge, I can remember playing, I believe their song was called Plowed. And I remember playing that a lot when I was at WROV in Roanoke, Virginia. I can remember playing Everclear, Santa Monica, a lot at this radio station as well. I mean, at the time, this was like 1996, 97. Like, those records were fucking huge. And Local H was thrown in there. I can't remember the song we used to play from Local H, but I will say this much about Local H. Two guys doing that at that time was cool as shit. And I didn't, again, really get it. Played their music. I was kind of like, not really into it. But when I saw them live in probably early 2000, my friend's band actually opened up for them in Santa Ana. And they were fucking amazing. Like I was totally blown away at these two musicians on stage just fucking killing it. And I can remember a record friend of mine had said, you can't hate a band until after you see them live. I still disagree with that statement, but I know where he was coming from. But these guys totally earned my respect when I saw them live because they were just that fucking good. Everclear, on the other hand, still not into them. Still don't care for them. Honestly, I haven't heard that song, Santa Monica, in probably 25 fucking years. I've never really heard it on, background music when you're walking to the store or any of that shit, whatever. So it is what it is. But I do remember meeting the lead singer, Art. I don't even know how you pronounce his last name out. Alexakis, maybe? Alexakis. Again, I don't really know how to pronounce his name. It's kind of irrelevant at this point because, quite honestly, I thought the guy was kind of a douchebag whenever we met him. And it was definitely when I was living in California. I can remember this. I don't remember specific details of the whole thing. But I can remember me and my friend were walking down on the Santa Monica Pier. And of course, you have, I think it's 3rd Street. It's got all the shops and restaurants and everything. And we're just walking down, just having a good old fucking time, just killing the day basically, in Los Angeles. And he looks over and he's like, dude, I think that's the guy from Everclear. And I'm like, who? Like what? And again, not a huge fan. Even to this day, if Art walked in front of me and hit me in the face, I don't think I would know who the fuck he was. But listen, these guys have all had way bigger careers than me and made a hell of a lot more money than me. So good, more power to them. But you can still be a dick even though you make a lot of money, right? Yes. So he's like, hey man, there's that dude from Everclear. I think it's Art something or other. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Maybe that's him. I don't really. He's like, let's go talk to him. I'm like, why are we going to talk to him? It's a Saturday afternoon. Like what? He's like, oh dude, I'm gonna tell him about my band or something. I'm like, oh fuck, here we go. My friend was always out promoting his band, which good credit where credit's due for him. Promoted the shit out of that fucking band all over the place, including he would even go promote his band on fucking Match.com. That was the craziest. That's a whole nother fucking podcast in itself. But I remember we walked over to him and he's kind of sitting out, like, you know, the restaurants are kind of out on, you know, where you walk and shop and everything. And you have, like, you know, the fenced in gated area, whatever. And they were right up against the railing there. And so we walked up and my friend, you know, says, hey, you know, blah, blah, blah. Aren't you, you know, Art from Everclear or whatever? And he's like, yeah, man. And they had like this little bit of a friendly conversation at first. And he's there with a few other friends. I remember them being like this, you know, table of like 4 or 6 or whatever. And they're just kind of hanging out. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't really know what to fucking say here because I don't really like your fucking band. And so my friend's like promoting his shit and they're talking. This conversation all happens in a matter of about 25 seconds. And then at some point he kind of looks at us like, hey man, I'm just trying to have some fucking lunch here. We're like, all right, cool, man. Nice to meet you, dickhead. And we kind of fucking, you know, walk away. And we were like, dude, did we do something wrong? Like, he wasn't eating. He did acknowledge the conversation. He did acknowledge who he was. So he obviously knew that we knew who he was. He didn't really, I mean, I'm assuming if somebody walks up and he's going to assume that they're fans, but we weren't like, oh, can we get an autograph? Or, and at the time you couldn't really, you know, we didn't have anything to take a picture with, you know, the phones weren't with camera and all that shit. I don't know if we had a fucking cell phone at that point. And it was just kind of fucking weird that in the matter of like this 25 to 30 seconds, he turns from, hey, yes, I am, to, hey, I'm trying to eat fucking lunch. And we were like, okay, cool, man. No fucking problem, douchebag. And we just kind of walked away and we both looked at each other like, dude, what a fucking dick. Like, again, I get it. And I think most people are very respectful of stars and musicians and things like that, of their popularity and giving them their privacy. But at the same time, that is one aspect of your life that you lose. And even back then, like, it really wasn't as bad as it is now with cell phones and TMZ and all that bullshit. Like, this is like 2000, maybe 99, 2000. Like, it's somewhere right in that range. And it's like, look, dude, chill the fuck out. Like, we're not here to invade your space and try and eat lunch with you. Like, that's the last thing I wanted to fucking do. And anyhow, so that's kind of how it was. And then we like walked away and we both were like, dude, what a fucking dick. And for me, it stuck in my head as one of those assholes that I've met along the way. And not even, I guarantee you, if I was interviewing him for like a radio station, he would have been way fucking cool, right? Because he would have known like, oh, they're playing my music. But this is like one of those things when you meet people like not in the element and they're kind of dicks. It's kind of like, maybe they're showing their true fucking self there. Who really fucking knows? But that's kind of that story. And I kind of chalk that up as probably one of probably less than 10 people of the assholes that I happened to meet over my, 18, 20 years, 15, 18 years in the fucking business. Like I've tried to calculate it and I go, okay, yeah. I was fired from there and then got back. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in a lengthy career, he is one guy that definitely falls in that list. There's some others, and I'll definitely talk about them in future episodes of the podcast. So, make sure you stay tuned for those because some of those are some pretty good ones too, including one where a guitarist was actually hitting on my friend's girlfriend at the time. Yeah, that's a pretty good story. That happened in Virginia too. So listen, WROV, I could tell you a lot of fucking stories about that radio station and the time I spent there. But we'll get into that on some future episodes for sure. In the meantime, thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you guys for liking and subscribing and sharing the podcast, leaving your feedback, man. It is all appreciated. It is all about helping, the podcast grow. And I thank you guys for it. I love you for it. And remember, you can also click the link down there somewhere in the description. And if you want to buy a fucking t-shirt, you can. They're just there. They're in, so like on TeePublic or whatever. So they're just kind of printed and done, but they're cool. I have one. I've washed the motherfucker probably 100 fucking times. Still looks as good as new. So you should just buy one. And I'm not even really making any money on it, quite honestly. So anyhow, hope you guys have a fucking awesome day. And cheers. Once again, a huge thank you to Jack fucking Daniels.
Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. You dig?
God bless the internet.